Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Dr. John LaCasse. He is a Ph.D., MBA, former faculty at prestigious Forbes School of Business. And he offers a breathtaking narrative that blends interstellar exploration, academic expertise, and a profound quest for divine connection. We'll understand about his returning to college, leaving influence behind at 55, 59, and also about the stories of building yachts for billionaires, encounters with saints and royalty, and the deeper truths uncovered in his books and spiritual journey. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you very much. My pleasure to
You're,
be here.
you're welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll learn about you, about finding heaven, about history, and also about finding purpose. We'll talk about all this. But before that, let's understand a bit about you, about your journey, about your background, about the royalties you met about Gene Hackman, about a lot of other things that we will that you have gone through and understood about life. Help us understand who John LaCasse is.
Well, you've done your homework. That's terrific. I appreciate that. First of all, I want to say a bit of a shout out to Dr. Singh, or to his father actually in Delhi. My dentist is Dr. Singh, and just got back from Delhi visiting his dad. So if his father's listening to you tonight, or if anyone else, call the guy, let him know. I mean, Dr. Singh is a great dentist, by the way. There's nothing really unusual about me. That's maybe what the charm is. Maybe that's what it's really about, is that, 35 years ago, I was doing $200 million in volume, and I really didn't have much of an education at that point. I'd spent 4 years in undergraduate school at the University of Montana. But I had bootstrapped myself in business, in sales and in construction, and finally in counter trade. I was looking for ways to make an industry that I was already in more profitable, and so I was doing that. And in that process, the thing what I was doing at that point to make the most money was I was building big yachts. I was the first mega yacht builder in the United States. And we came out of the door at 150 feet. So we had a very strong market share, and I was making a lot of money, and I had 3 airplanes and a penthouse and a sports car and 2 boats and a bunch of stuff that you would have when you don't know what to do with your time or your money. And my wife finally came to me and she said, you're gonna die. You're killing yourself. This is crazy. I was 59 years old, and I had more money than God in that context, and I could do no wrong. All I could do was drink and make money. That was it. And I had no motivation to be anything other than, that. And so she said, you just have to quit or you're just going to die. And so I did. I just walked away, and we went to Paris, and I started to, and I checked into the Sorbonne University of Paris. And I started to read. I went to the various bookstores. I was doing a lot of background research and things like that, because I did have the advantage of being able to do a lot of research and I studied metaphysics and religion and history and philosophy and all that stuff, and sat around Shakespeare and Company in Paris and read and I spent every day at Notre Dame. I went over to Notre Dame every day before it burnt, and would sit there, and sort of cogitate around Charlemagne and those guys. So I had a great environment, and I was I was kind of like, I was trying to speculate on why was I doing this? Why did I spend 59 years? I mean, there's a couple of stories. One is I was a graduate student at George Washington University. I'll go back for just a second. I was in education administration as a graduate student, and I was 59. I was an old man at that point because I had just started school. I was an old man, and they sent me over to a middle school to check in as a graduate student and do my internship. Well, they expected a 20-year-old kid to walk in, and I came in at 59. I got gray hair, and so they were courteous, and I didn't know what to do because I was out of context. So I said, well, I tell you what, I said, let me have a look at your books. I'll see how you're doing here because I've got a great business background. Let me see how you're doing. So the principal lets me look at the books. I walk into the staff and I tell the faculty and staff, I said, I think you guys are cooking the books. I said, these are crooked. This makes no sense here. You guys are moving the budget around and you've got too much money going to special ed, not enough money in general education. Well, they started to panic. Who is this guy? And so they called George Washington University and they called the dean of the education department. And they had me relieved. They had me thrown out of school because I was a danger to the institution, to the industry. Well, that happened to me repeatedly, as it turns out. I won't go into all the details, but I attacked the faculty routinely and I got tossed. I got thrown out. I finally went to Chicago and met with the president of Benedictine University in Chicago. And we had lunch together in his office. And he was a volunteer fireman on the side. And I kind of liked that whole idea. And I ended up getting an MBA from him. But anyway, what happened to me, AJ, in the great scheme of things is that as I defused and got away from money and power and all my airplanes and all my stuff, I began to think philosophically about metaphysics and about astrophysics and about the universe and about flow. And it occurred to me that people work too hard at being successful. That's what I thought was going. That's what I felt was going on. People forget that the universe is form and flow, and it's balance, and it's natural. It's not sequestered into trying to comply with policy. The universe doesn't care about policy. The universe doesn't care about how big your house is. The universe is supply and demand and balance. That's all it is. And so for me, I was worrying too hard about making money, and I was making money. But what I was missing, completely missing, was that the universe didn't care. In fact, nobody cared. My job here was to relax and enjoy the ride and sort of obey the law of the pack and get to know ethereally what was beyond my third dimension. And I started to think about maybe working in the fourth dimension, because why not? Who's going to stop me? Who's going to call me wrong? So I did. And there's a reason for that goes back to the University of Montana in 1961 that I don't talk about very much, but it did happen. I was a student of Dr. Leslie Fiedler. Fiedler became a very well-known and successful social scientist. He got Guggenheim Awards and several other things that were of equal stature. And he tested me for weeks, along with some other students, but I seemed to be the one he kept coming back to. And then he brought in a guy, a doctor named Harold Tasher, and he had Tasher look at me, and they both came to me one day and they said, John, you seem to be an odd subject here. Like maybe you're not from here. Well, as a college student, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear that. I changed my major to drinking beer and shooting pool right away. So, but he said, you can change your body temperature, your appendix can change, you can do all kinds of stuff. And we just don't see that ever. So maybe you have a different kind of a connection. So I didn't think about that for another 60 or 70 years. And then it came back and I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe Fiedler had an idea there. Maybe this is my mission. Maybe I'm supposed to look for God and for spirituality as opposed to money. I had the money, and that didn't do anything for me. I had the power. And I used to fly back and forth to visit my mother in my own airplane, and I would have coffee, and some guy would visit me, and he'd land a helicopter in my front yard. I mean, that's really impressive to your neighbors, but so what? So I went to Paris, and I really started to focus. And I'm not going to say that I don't think I was any more equipped to think in terms of outside dimensions than anybody else, although that's what Fiedler said I was. But I did, as it turns out, I did bump into St. Thomas Aquinas in Paris. And not very many people meet a 13th century theologian, and I did. And I wrote 3 books about it. Eben Alexander had a case of encephalitis and went to heaven for a week, came back, talked about it. And I think a lot of people move into other dimensions, move into outside dimensions. And I believe it's a process that you can do. I wasn't trying as much as I was trying. I was escaping. I was getting away from my other life, and I was sort of backing into this new life without realizing I was getting there. And I'm walking out of the library at the Sorbonne University, and this guy's walking next to me, and it turns out to be Thomas Aquinas. And he introduces himself like that. He and I go and have coffee, and of course, I can see him, but nobody else can. And we're having coffee at Plaza St. Michael in Paris. And I ended up getting arrested, or almost arrested, because I was having this conversation with this, like Harvey, this guy that wasn't there. But this went on for a long time. And I brought 3 other women into my situation that I knew had capacity and the power and circumstance to kind of join me in this. If this was real, could it be real? Am I walking around with Thomas Aquinas, or am I not? And can we move into 3 or 4 dimensions? Well, it's hard in a way to talk about it, because to many people it doesn't make any sense. When Eben Alexander came out of his case of encephalitis and told the faculty administrators at Harvard that as far as he was concerned, he had been in the golden orbs of heaven for a week and came back, they fired him. They got rid of him. If you're a tenured professor at a local university and you start talking about this stuff, you're down the road. The advantage I had was I didn't need any of those people. I didn't need any of them. I could buy them and sell them. So if I want to talk to Thomas Aquinas, that's exactly what I was going to do. And it worked out just fine. If we want to walk around the library, that's what we're going to do. And that was what we did. Well, I met all kinds of people then. And pretty soon, I brought in these other 3 gals. One of them is in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada. The other one is in Arizona here, and the other one is in Los Angeles. And I saw them as witnesses to the spirituality of what my second life was taking on, how it was happening. And it wasn't based on religion or dogma or prayer or anything. It was based on function of the balance of the universe and just letting it happen. My purpose, I didn't have a purpose. Maybe that's the good news. I didn't have a purpose. I recognized intellectually that nature was balanced one way or the other. And that if all my job was to get into that balance, my job was not to try and compete with it. My job was to get into it. And I had the capacity I have a bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree in business. I have a law degree. I have a doctor's degree. I got all sorts of degrees. I went to school nonstop for 20 years, just so I could get all these degrees. And like your previous guest did, I also have a lot of debt, which I finally paid off. but anyway, I probably should have talked to him earlier. So,
absolutely, but you are a man who has great capacity to learn. You can still do many things out of that learning.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, I got lucky, I guess. But so anyway, so what we did is I got these three women um, who stuck with me, along with some other people. They're relatively famous in history that came to the party as well, and we launched an expedition into the interstellar, uh, and it was a virtual expedition, excepting that we were living it every day, and we the first the one book is called Deals, Danger, Destiny, which is, and I hate to talk about books, but it is in the books, the third part of that book. And then there's another one called Floppy Feathers, and that book has to do with my getting accustomed to the methodology of the high holy order, of the politics of heaven. And I found out that there was a great deal of gender bias in heaven at that point. It's sort of a male dominant operation. And I brought in Hildegard of Bingen, who was a 13th century saint, actually, and she and I talked for a while. And then we did a book called The Hunters, and The Hunters is the expedition itself, where we took off into the interstellar. We used a lot of modern technology to try and think our way into whatever level of order we needed to see if there was, in fact, a divine presence in the universe. And I don't want to give away what we found out, but we did. It was successful. Everyone that's in the book, with the exception of the saints, are still alive. One is in, like I said, California, one is in Arizona, and one is in Canada. And they are witness to the trip. So it wasn't just me who went off and did this thing. I took 3 people with me. And I think that's probably a first. I don't think it's ever been done before. And I have, believe me, people think I'm crazy. There's no doubt about that. But the beauty of people thinking I'm crazy is I don't care. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. And I think that as I meet people who have had near-death experiences, especially around here, because this is where it all started, when someone has had that kind of experience, their story is inviolate. They will never come off their story because the story becomes so real. And so it's a lived experience. And I had to do a lot of preparation. I had to do years of preparation to get ready to the point where I could get myself in that position. I don't have a formula for it either. It was only a situation. I didn't plan it. There was no book. I didn't go to school to learn how to do it. And no priest or rabbi or anybody else came to me and said, if you read these passages, or if you recite this mantra enough times, you're going to elevate. I didn't know any of that. I just went to Shakespeare and Company, started reading. I mean, I bought so many books at Shakespeare and Company, they kept giving me free bags. I'd walk in and they'd direct me down. I said, where did Hemingway sit? And this woman, she took me down to Hemingway's chair. She said, he sat there. I said, I want to sit there. She said, okay, sit there. She'd bring me books. And I'd buy them by the bagful, and I'd read them on the river. One day, Aquinas, I had a boat at the time. I still had one of my boats. It was called the Sundog. And the Sundog in the weather is that 22-degree ring around the sun that you see when there's ice forming around the clouds and the sun shows through it. That's called a sundog. It's mostly an Indian culture. So I had talked about that. Well, I'm sitting on the banks of the river, and a canal boat goes by, and I'm right in front of Shakespeare and Company, and this mist comes off the boat, and a rainbow kind of forms there. And sure enough, I start hearing Aquinas talk to me again. And he says, is this what you call a sundog, John? I said, no. I said, a sundog is in the sun. I said, you're in a rainbow. He said, we'll talk about that. So it was those kinds of events. I was sitting down, and I mean, there's just hundreds of them. And I also was kind of fearless in the public. In Paris, I'm sitting in a restaurant, and I'm with Aquinas, and we're talking, And the restaurant manager and some other people think I'm crazy because I'm talking to myself. And so they call the police, the Paris police. And the Paris police come and they approach me and they ask me, like they would anybody who might be crazy, also might be dangerous. And they wanted to know what I was doing. Well, Aquinas starts to laugh because he knows I'm in trouble. He's not stupid. he's the best Western theologian that ever lived. He knows that I just built myself a trap. And so the manager of the restaurant, believing that I'm telling the truth, tells the policeman that it's okay, that he'll take charge, he'll take care of it, and invites the policeman to go. And the policeman backs away, and they sit there and they stand there for a long time and they watch me. And pretty soon one comes over and looks under the table to see if there's anybody under the table, because I'd ordered 2 cups of coffee, and I had a cup in front of me, and there was one in front of Aquinas, and his cup started to rattle, and they couldn't believe what they were seeing, because, and I think he was doing it on purpose. And so the cop comes over and looks under the table to see if there's somebody in it. Of course, he wasn't. He was sitting right there. But he'd rattled his cup to piss him off. I thought, this guy, hey, it was that kind of authentic, day-to-day, man-to-man, woman-to-woman, whatever it is. Here we are. We're taking a walk in the interstellar. It's the 4th dimension. We're in a tesseract. Some people believe there's 11 dimensions, 7, 9, 6, whatever it is. We tried to get to 4. I think we made it. We certainly did as well as Eben Alexander did, and we didn't get fired over it. I have letters from Rupert Sheldrake, who is fascinated by the whole idea. In fact, Eben Alexander himself wrote a letter. Both those guys are on the back of one of my books because they've been there and done that. They're 2 people. It's like Roger Penrose. The guys that are on the science side, I'm talking. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm talking so much. I don't know.
Carry on. Don't worry. Carry on. I'm listening. The world is listening, and they would want to know more about it.
The people that I met that I know or I read in science seem to all have the same problem, and that's why I was so pleased to have some of the bigger names come back and ratify what happened to us, because people like Sheldrake and Alexander, these are Harvard people. And by the way, I did go to Harvard. I have a transcript at Harvard, and so they. I'm kind of forgetting my thought here, but what I found out, what I've learned in reading these people and talking with them, is that hard science always gets firewalled against their system never gets them past the 3rd dimension of science itself. They can never grow. They can never reach into spirituality. They always get firewalled, and when they get older, they always have the same problem. The atheist scientist, finally, when he gets old enough and crooked enough, and has read enough books, says, well, there might be a God after all, because I can't disprove it mathematically. No matter how I try and measure mass against volume, against gravity, against everything else, and fall into black hole after black hole, I still can't disprove that there's God. So maybe there is. Probably the biggest atheist of all time was Christopher Hitchens. And when he was dying, I think it was Richard Dawkins or somebody asked him if he would finally believe in God. And he said, well, this is no time to piss anybody off, I guess. So even even these guys, finally in the 11th hour, they side up with God or Christ or whoever they want to talk about, Muhammad or somebody. I noticed that Joe Rogan just recently decided to get religion. I never thought I'd see that. So there's something going on out there. There really is. The good news is that I figured it out 35 years ago, and I'm still working on it. And it's now I think what I've noticed, I guess, is that when I went to Paris, and I went to Paris about 6 or 7 times, and spent a lot of time in Paris because that seemed to be where I was resonating with these situations. Uh, there was one of the three women. Her name was Marilee, and she turned out to have more power than I imagined. She kind of got amped up. She was very powerful, and she could do stuff that was pretty amazing. But uh, I don't know. Ask me a question. I don't know what the hell. I mean, what can I say? It's just people think I'm crazy, and I'm fine with that. I don't care. We did it.
I don't know. Right, John. I don't know about those people, but I can tell you it's so interesting to talk to you and learn from you and learn about you and all the stories that you are talking about. And there is so much to learn and talk about you, John. So first, let me try and understand it a bit from the this world itself, and then when we come to the fourth dimension part and heaven and all, is that you have so much of influence in life. You royalty to saints to everyone. I want to understand how people work and live and die for such influences in your life. $1 million in a grocery bag, carrying $1 million in a grocery bag. I still want to understand where that grocery bag is. But coming to the point is, John, is that where did you acquire all this influence from? Obviously you can't acquire it by just reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. There is something beyond that. Where did you gather all this influence? What is the trick of acquiring influence in life, John?
Well, first of all, I don't think there is a trick to it. I don't think there's a methodology. I just, it's a valid question to ask me, how did I acquire this power, this money, and this influence? Because I did. I had it all. And at least in 35 years ago, if you're knocking down $200 million, you're in pretty good shape. And I did all that. But I did it because I was curious. I was sitting in the office one time in a sales office, and Bill Boeing walked in from the Boeing Aircraft Company, and he said to me, "Is the coffee ready?" I said, "Yeah." And I'm turned around, I said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Bill Boeing." I said, "Airplanes?" He said, "Yeah." And I never flinched. I just made the coffee, and I sat down, and we talked about a chart that was on the wall. When Gene Hackman walked in, and I'm talking to Hackman, I'm talking about in my mind, I'm interested in his shoes, his topsiders. I'm not interested in his celebrity. I don't care about his celebrity. I want to know where he got his shoes. And I wasn't doing that by design. I was doing that because it was normal curiosity about a human being that walked in. I had people running in my office or being chased by the police. I had one guy came in, he tossed me the keys to his Mercedes 600, being chased by the cops. Well, so I gave his car to my lawyer, and I said, "Here, take care of this car for this guy." I got a call one day from the president of Mexico. I got a call from Prince Rainier of Monaco. He wanted to come over and look at his boat. I'm in a meeting. I guess I'm telling you this story because it's flow. I think it's flow. I don't think it's effort. It's flow. I'm in a meeting with some guys, and they are trying to manipulate me in a deal that I'm not very happy about it. But they're working because it's a business transaction. My secretary, Ann McAllister, walks up to me. She's got her phone in her hand, and she said, "John, there's a call for you. I think you should take it." and she's interrupting a meeting. So I know she's serious. So I say, okay. So I take the call. Well, it's Prince Rainier of Monaco, and he wants me to come look at his boat. So we talk for a while. I hang it up. And so I was cocky. I put down my hand on the phone, and I said, okay. I said, I get Prince Rainier of Monaco, and you guys get a hockey puck in the teeth. And that's what I said. And we left for Monaco. and you know, I didn't care about anything. I didn't care. And by not caring, I wasn't putting out any negative energy. Nobody could come next to me and think I was manipulating them, because I wasn't. I didn't care what they thought, who they were. I didn't care how big they were. I got drunk with George Shultz one day, who had a meeting the next day with President Reagan. And he was the Secretary of the Treasury at the time. We get on the boat, and he's going to open up the Tutankhamun exhibit, and he wanted to stop by the office. I knew Schultz wanted to stop by the office. So George Schultz comes in. And his wife was with him, and she was deaf. And he and I open up a bottle of, VO or whatever it is. We start to drink, because we're not going to open the show for another like 4, 5, 6 hours. So we're popping a bunch of drinks, and people are coming by, and we're talking. And his wife comes out, and she starts to sign him. And I could tell that she was excited. And he was getting drunker by the minute, and so was I. So finally she walks out, and she holds up a suit bag. And in the suit bag, she opens it up, and there's no pants. It's a tuxedo, and there's no pants. He forgot his pants. And he's about to open up the show in about the next 45 minutes. So there's a highway patrolman standing right next to us on the dock, because we had a full security detail, because he was so important. I look at the cop, and I say to Schultz, I say, look, I said, that guy's got a pair of striped blue pants that almost fits your tuxedo. Let's trade him a pair of your pants for his pants and see if we can get out of here. So we did. We traded the highway patrolman a pair of pants, of George Schultz's pants. And then he signs the guy a couple of dollar bills and gives it to him. And we go to the show. Well, that was great. Well, I mean, I'm sure we were table talk for months after that, but it didn't make any difference. It was just fun. And it was just, being whatever you want to be. I mean, Hackman was an absolute gentleman. I was sorry to see him go. He was an amazing guy and a serious yachtsman. And we were, I was 25. I was a lot of years in the yacht business, but and we built. How I got in the mega yacht business? You want to hear that? How I got into the business in the first place? Again, it's the same story exactly. A guy walks into me, and his name is Frank Rico. He owns 17 shopping centers, and I know him by reputation. And he pulls out this set of plans for a 50-foot boat, and he says, I want to build this in steel. And I say, I don't build steel. I'm building in fiberglass. I don't know anything about steel. But I said to him, Frank, I will go have a look at this and see. I'll see what I can do to help you out. So I go down to Tacoma Boat, which is a Navy contractor for ships. They built frigates and cruisers that are 450 feet long. And I didn't know what I was getting into. I walk in there. I'm just going to ask the guy to build me a boat. I walk into the yard superintendent. He's got, cigarette burns on his hands. His pants are unpressed, and there he is in his office. We got cigarette smoke, right across our foreheads. I lay open my plans, and I say, here, I need this boat in 50 feet. Can you do this? He said, I'm not going to build that. I said, why not? He says, it's too small. We don't build that boat. As I'm thinking and watching him, I'm looking behind him on the wall behind him. And on the wall behind him is a frigate and a cruiser, U.S. Navy frigate and a cruiser. And they're beautiful. And I say in the moment to this guy, Well, if I paint those white, would you call them a yacht? He said, I don't care what you call them, just so your check's clear. And I thought to myself, okay, now we're just talking about context. He just told me he's going to build a yacht. I got, all my checks have to do. I can do that. So I go back to Seattle and I call some friends who I know would be interested in this deal. I call Ron Rivet, who was at that point the chairman of Super 8 Motels. He's building one new motel every 72 hours. I said, Ron, I need a buyer for this boat. I need a straw buyer because I just can't go off telling people we're going to do this without somebody I can lean on. He said, all right, I'll be the buyer. And I call an architect I know in the Netherlands. He flies over from Amsterdam. And we finally get a drawing of a boat that makes sense at 150 feet. And the architect who's playing with the whole idea draws Darth Vader in the bridge because he thought that was cool because it was kind of a jazzy looking boat. So we decided to take it to the Fort Lauderdale show. We have no idea what we're doing. We just know that we've got a really good team of people and we'll figure it out as we go. No plan, no book of rules, no nothing. We're just rolling and we're taking it forward. Just say yes. So we're leaving for the show. We've got 25 feet of show space at Fort Lauderdale. And I don't have anything I don't have anything other than models and a concept, no video, no nothing. I call the yard. I say, what have you got that we can show? He said, we don't have anything, but we got something. You can take that. I take the video and we go to the show. We set it up in 2 days. The show opens. People are standing there. I take this. It was a VCR. I stick it in, turn it on. I don't know what's going to happen. Well, it turns out to be deck gun trials of the Navy. These are cannons shooting off the side of ships with brass going down the rails. And I'm at a yacht show. Well, the people are stunned. Like, what is this about? And in the moment, again, just, no rules. I said, well, sir, this is United States military Navy contractor. Can you imagine how good that yacht is going to be? If they decide, if the United States government, if the Navy decides to build you a yacht, can you imagine how good that's going to be? And look at this design. I show them the design. We sold 2 150-foot boats that afternoon. We made millions of dollars in a matter of minutes. And we couldn't hit our ass with both hands. And then we had to go back and we had to figure it all out. And we did. And our first boat was sold to a furniture manufacturer in North Carolina. It was amazing. So if you want to talk to the trees, then go talk to them. If you want to get next to nature, go out in your backyard and get next to it. If you want to meet God, look in the mirror. If you want to be true to yourself and be part of the interstellar and part of the, if you want to be part of the science of spirituality, then just be it. Go ahead and learn about it, but don't be afraid of God. Don't be afraid of a spirit. Don't be afraid of spirituality. Don't be afraid of deities. Don't be afraid of anything. Just don't be afraid, because nothing is out to get you. There's nothing in this universe that's after you. It's all a matter of balance. And I think that the correct answer is to not fight against it, is to go with it. Allow yourself to go. I mean, I'm in my 84th year. I'm going fine. I'm rolling. I don't know how long I'm going to live, but I'm still reading books and, I'm talking to you, so what the hell? You're smart. I run a good company, right?
Absolutely, John. What's the story about those $1 million in a grocery bag? Why would you do that?
Well, I was talking to the president of Mexico, and to who is Carlos Salinas, and his sister Adriana wanted to buy a yacht, and they wanted to buy, and they wanted to buy PACCAR's yacht, Pacific Car and Foundry, and they made tanks and trucks and stuff like that. So I get this call, and it's from Mexico, and they said, could that boat be bought? And I said, yeah, sure. I think so. I'll go talk to Chuck Piggott, who was the chairman of PACCAR. He said, sure. I said, how much you want for it? He said, I want $1 million. I said, all right. And then he said, what's the commission? I said, the commission's $100,000. He said, okay. And so he wanted $1 million and the commission was 100,000. And so I tell my contact in Mexico, who turns out to be Javier Rodriguez, that they could buy the boat for $1 million, and then they can't keep the name and so forth. We just have this transaction. So they agree. And so I said, well, we have to, we need to contract some kind of stuff, to certify this. And he said, all right. He said, we're talking about PACCAR's yacht, Charles Pickett. That's the boat. You represent them? I said, yes, 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 and yes. He said, all right. He said, hang on a minute. So he puts me on hold. He gets back on and he said, and there's a day and a time. He said, on this day and on this time, like it's, 3:30 in the afternoon on next Thursday, go to the North Concourse of Seattle Tacoma International Airport and stand across the causeway from the Burger King by the steel door. And it will open. And we will handle the transaction with you there. Well, what came out of the door was $1 million in cash in the bag. And then I had to take it someplace. So they just gave me the money. And they flew it, cabin service, on a flight from Mexico to Seattle, walked through the thing and just handed it out the door and gave it to me. Well, who believed that there was $1 million in that bag? Who would think that? Nobody. But that's what I had. And then I spent all night counting it on the floor of my office, trying to get it deposited because I didn't want it. And then it was the transaction itself, when they finally came to take delivery, was funny because Adriana came and she wanted to drive in my truck. She didn't want to drive in the limousine. She wanted to drive in my truck. And I didn't. My truck wasn't armored. They got all fussy and sweaty about that. And then we went to the Westin Hotel downtown, and Adriana's husband, who was Carlos's sister, Carlos's sister was Adriana, and her husband was still up in the room, and he was late. And there was me and some other people and the surveyors and whatever, and we're surrounded by Secret Service people that are carrying guns. And so the husband, who was embarrassed about being late, calls the kitchen at the Westin Hotel and orders everything on the menu, and has it delivered to the table for our review so that we can pick what we want. He doesn't want us to have to worry about the menus. We just look at the food. Well, okay. Good. These trays of food start walking by. We can pick the one we want. I'll have one of those and whatever. It's, I was in a Learjet 24 one time. We flew it as high as we could fly it until the engine flamed out. And then we took it down again because the owner of the airplane thought it'd be fun. I was petrified, but it's when you've, on the money side, when there's nothing to do but have money, then you take risks. You do all sorts of stuff. You're looking for something. They're looking for all the wrong stuff. They're looking for satisfaction in an arena where it doesn't exist. What's the point of burning out your engine on a Lear 24? What's the point of running a horse to death? What's the point? There's no point to any of this. Read a book. Go to your. Somebody today called about my third book, and they said, and it was about spirituality, and they said, they're talking about what I wrote. They said, what John writes, you will not find in your sanctuary. You better get out of your sanctuary, and you better have a look around. And I spend a lot of time in the forest. I spend a lot of time on the ridgelines of the Rocky Mountains, just talking to the trees. I've read understory, overstory. I deal with cats. I love to talk cats to 38,000 hertz. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I wish I had a better answer. I don't. I don't. And I just know it works. It works if you don't try. It works if you don't try. If you try too hard to find God, you won't do it. You've got to let God find you. You've got to let spirituality happen because it's already happening. It's not like you're reinventing the wheel. It isn't like all of a sudden you invent this event. It's there. It's all part of the fabric of the universe. And you can read books on physics and see it before your eyes routinely. You can see how particle theory works and how mass and gravity work and how they bend time and space, and all that stuff is there. It can be proven mathematically, and it's just like opening up your brain. I mean, it's neurons. It's not pictures. It's not the stuff. It's not the Empire State Building. It's neurons. And this is what you have to tune. You have to tune this to figure out what that is. And that's what I did. And I did it, I think, because a Guggenheim professor of sociology and psychology and whatever in 1961, the University of Montana, told me that he couldn't figure me out. He said, there's something different about you. You're just not the same. You're not from here. Well, I mean, in modern terms, that means I'm a starseed, I mean, people call themselves starseeds today. And that wasn't even, nobody knew what that was in 1961. And I don't know. It's difficult. It really is. The problem is it's too easy. That's part of the problem. Is to be a fellow in the interstellar. I'm not saying to be a Christian or a Muslim or anything else. I'm just saying to be a fellow in the interstellar, to be part of the interstellar so that it works. You just have to be curious and open. But that takes practice because your brain is full of information all the time. And I don't mean you have to sit down and meditate. People think that's an answer. I've never meditated 15 seconds of my life. I mean, maybe I've done something that may approach meditation, but I don't meditate. I don't do any monk activity. I don't lay down on the carpet at 4 o'clock in the morning and, try and cleanse my brain of activity. No, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to the bathroom. I don't know what I'm doing. But I am always positioning by curiosity, just by curiosity. I wonder what that means. I wonder what if that was this way or that way. What does that mean? And I notice patterns in trees. I'll go out in the forest and I'll see trees that actually bend over and look like they're talking to one another. I got a picture of one time where these two trees seem to be talking. Now, there's books out there right now that demonstrate that trees support one another and they feed each other and they fight bugs. When I was much younger, I worked for the Forest Service as a Ribegoon for the spruce bug beetle in Yellowstone Park here in the United States. And that was our job, was to help these trees fight off these bugs. Well, now I find out that there's a natural process that the trees go through, and they sort of take care of it themselves. But we've let them do it. There's microorganisms underneath the ground that go on for thousands of miles. As the universe talks to the trees talk to themselves. People walk around, talk to it, birds. And there's a term in science called superposition where the electrons spin opposite one another, but the connection can be, it's indefinite, how far away they can be. I think that spin, that superposition spin, is kind of the state that you get in. I think that's really what it is. There's no data transfer scientifically in a superposition. But I believe from experience that if you're quiet and you allow that to happen, the data transfer will be a confabulation that you do yourself. But if you know the information properly, you're probably not going to be wrong because it's interpretive. It's like if you talk to a deaf mute or blind man or whatever it is, a person, there's going to be cues you're going to pick up from that. You'll pick up cues from trees, you pick up cues from animals, you pick up cues from your dog, your cat, whatever. These are cues. And all that without a rule book allows you to do it. What? Huh?
Absolutely.
Am I
Absolutely,
nuts?
John. No, there is so much to learn. There is so much to understand. But there is a limit of time also. But so my last question to you is to understand this. You talk about universe. So what is it that the universe wants from us, John? And people talk of heaven, people talk of God. Should I be looking for heaven or should I be looking for God? How should one understand? What is your advice on this? You have talked about fourth dimension, fifth dimension, many dimensions. Help us understand so that people can understand from your understanding.
From my perspective, and my perspective is practiced over time. I think that the first thing we must avoid is the graphic interpretation of God. It's okay to have an amulet. It's okay to have a picture of a man or a woman or whatever you want to have, but that's not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is harmony in nature. I think that, and at least I'm talking about myself now, not about anybody else, but this is my position. If the question is, should I look for God or should I look for heaven? Well, it doesn't make any difference. That's not going to hold you back. You can look for God or heaven, or a feral cat. What you got to look for is the harmony in nature, the harmony in the universe. And I believe the best way to do that is to understand how the harmony works. And that's the study of mass and electromagnetism and all these things that cause things to attract and react to one another. Everything's in reaction all the time. And that includes God. Now, then the obvious question is, well, was there a first cause? Are we going to go after God? Well, that's what we did. We have the same question you have. Who are we looking for here? Who's out there? And how do we find it? And how fast do we have to go? And where is this guy, if it's a guy or a woman? And so we launched an expedition, and we brought in some very interesting players, and both dead and alive. And I'll tell you, we got as close as a voice. We got that close that we could understand. And again, it gets down to interpretation. We found one of the most interesting things we found is a distortion in scale. We weren't ready for that. We weren't ready for things to be distorted wildly out of proportion to what our perception was. We found out that things like space-time geometry and perception and the curvature of space is a real thing. And our perception of time, space, and travel and time dilation are very singular and very much in our own heads and to those people around us. So we got these enormous distortions in size and travel and speed that we didn't expect. But that was part. And then we started to study Roger Penrose after he got his Nobel Prize. And we started to realize that was the real deal, that that's what we should have expected. We just didn't know that. But the good news is that we got to experience what he got to do is write about it. And that makes a nice combination. When I told Rupert Sheldrake what was going on, boy, first of all, he said, I'm very happy you're writing about these things, John. But then he looked at my manuscript. He says, but we got to tidy this up. We just have to tidy this up. So he was immediately Sheldrake went right away to his concept of what was going on, because he had to tidy me up. And I said, that's terrific. That's great. And then, so to answer your question, I'm sorry, I've been rambling for, better part of an hour, but don't look for God and don't look for heaven. Look for something you recognize. Look for anything that's outside the third dimension. The way a bird whistles, the way a dog barks, the way the wind blows, any anomaly that might get you into another situation. Look for that, because those are the doorways. Those are the paths. Heidegger wrote great books, but this is not the path. But they're wonderful. Everybody that writes books are wonderful. I mean, I'm one of them. I've got 5 novels, and 3 of them are on this series. It's interesting. My publisher, who could have thrown me out in the street, is publishing all 3 books as a memoir and not as science fiction. He believes it. At least, believes in enough. And it's a pretty big publisher. So when in the old days, when I would go into Paris into Notre Dame, I'd walk into Notre Dame on the right side, and the Joan of Arc nave was there, and I'd sit in front of Notre Dame, in front of Joan of Arc for I think hours, because I had the time to do it. And Charlemagne was just outside, and I'd say, what the hell motivated you to do your deal? What was that about? And I would sit there and have this sort of quiet, under my breath conversation with Joan of Arc. Well, tourists were coming by the hundreds, sometimes 1,000, and listen to the day. And I'm sitting there in this endless dialogue with someone that's made of stone. But it wasn't the statue I was talking to, and it might not have been Joan of Arc, but it was the circumstance, it was the medieval circumstance that I was involved in. I did a deal one time into the same set of circumstances I'm describing with an Indian tribe in Washington State, in the Colville tribe, 9 Indian tribes. We were going to build, and I did this with Benedictine University and George Washington. After they threw me out, they brought me back in because they realized there was something going on, and they became my business partner. George Washington throws me out as a student, then they become my business partner in a transaction with the Colville tribe. So you never know what's going to happen in the next round, And so NASCAR's there. We're got a hotel, a college. I have people in China. We're doing the deal. We're all set to go. We find a spirit circle on the land that has algae going back thousands of years. We have to be able to exempt the spirit circle in this big transaction. I'm talking about a NASCAR track and hotels and colleges. We're building a great big thing. The chairman of the tribe and I walk up on the final day, and we're going to do the deal. The spirit animal for the Colville is a coyote. We walk up, and there's a coyote sitting in the middle of the spirit circle. And the deal was stopped, and we never went back. The Indians wouldn't move. They said, our spirit animal doesn't want us to do this. Now, I don't know how that coyote got there, and I was salivating over the deal. But I knew whether it was a druid or God or whatever it is, or the coyote, somebody decided we were supposed to do this, and they sent a coyote to stop it. Well, okay. I'll take that. I don't need any proof. I know the coyote was there. I know I had a check in my pocket for $34 million that was going to be the down payment, and I couldn't present it. because Mike Marchand, the chairman of the tribe, decided that the coyote was more important than my $34 million. And I honored him for that. What else could I do? You know,
There is so much to learn from you, John, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to learn more and more and more from you, about your journey. And sometimes I wonder what is it that you have not done. You have done almost everything from, education to spirituality to even organized crime to understand that. And so many books, royalties, saints, yachts to all to even the Hollywood actors. So a lot of people who read books and several books. For all those people who would want to connect with you, what
well, they
is the
can.
best way? What is the best way for them to?
Well, I have a website, just my name, johnlacasse.com. And that's my contact information is there. So you can email me. My email address is just my name, johnlacasse@msn.com. And then johnlacasse.com is my website. So it's all the same or close enough. So, I mean, those are all direct access. That comes straight to me. I mean, right here in this room, I call myself the LaCasse Institute, which is silly because I don't have I don't have any of that stuff. I had to call myself something. So I call myself an institute. Must be cool. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm wide open. No problem. Happy to talk to anybody. I mean, in one of the books, Fight for the Quantum, I have interviews with the one of the head of Jones Act operation for ConocoPhillips, a woman with the Sierra Club, all people who have been dead or have been involved in death and come back. That went into the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension. The guy, the executive with ConocoPhillips, came to me when he realized I was involved in this, and he said, "I've never told anybody this," because he couldn't afford to. I mean, he couldn't afford to talk about that. He'd get fired. He said, I've never told anybody this, but he said, "Let me tell you." Well, his story was amazing, just amazing. And another woman, the Sierra Club woman, I mean, she met her to be yet to be born daughter. She was the woman was going to drown in the Snake River, and her daughter comes to her and asks her not to die because she wanted to be born to have her other child, and and she was who she was. I mean, Eben Alexander met his sister he never met before. There are people out there, and they're measured in high numbers, who've had extraordinary experiences that are afraid to talk about it because they're afraid of the reaction. And I just feel sorry for them. I mean, this guy he's really, when he was talking to me, he was a mess, but he had to talk. It's been bothering him for years, and it had to do with his brother in a high school graduation. It was amazing. An amazing story that had all the credibility. I interviewed probably the most famous near-death experience woman in the world is the famous story of the blue shoe here. Her name is Kimberly Clark, and I mean, she's famous. I had her here for hours talking to her. So, I mean, we didn't talk about that tonight, but I've gone up all those streams and all those doors and talked to people that have similar stories. The difference between me and some of them is that I had an advantage where I didn't need to be hired. I didn't need to be compliant because I already had nailed it. I was there. And so I could do and say what I wanted to. I was bulletproof. And a lot of people that are key executives or academics, whatever you want, they can't do that because somebody's going to turn them loose. You're crazy. Goodbye. Good luck. Goodbye and good luck. Well, okay. So I'm a safe haven for those kind of people. Absolutely. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. There's so much to learn from you, John, and I'm sure a lot of people would would connect with you and connect with you. But this is just the first of our interviews. There is so much to learn about the fourth dimension, fifth dimensions, and many dimensions, and all the different characters in your life. We'll talk about your book also. With this, it's a wrap. So, any last words from you?
I'll try and be more coherent next time.
No. You don't. You just be yourself. You were yourself, and I loved it that way, John. Okay?
All right.
That is wonderful.
Then I think my last word then is, I guess, would be, don't get so invested in something you can't walk away from it. Be curious, but don't get trapped by anything. Be able to move. Just don't be afraid. Be able to move, and that way you've got your mobility.
Absolutely. With these words of wisdom, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thanks, AJ. My pleasure.